Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Mariancho, and it's Saturday. Time for the injury report for Week 14. After all these player news and updates, I will give you my final rankings as well as picks against the spread and straight up in Week 14. So let's get it going. We're going to go game by game and tell you all the players who are relevant. Let's begin in Tennessee, where the Titans are healthy for this game. There are no problems with their roster. Jacksonville, though, is going to be without quarterback Trevor Lawrence. He was placed on IR. We're going to get Mac Jones the rest of the season, and they're openly tanking at this point. But I do think that Brian Thomas is still relevant. I do think Mac Jones will send him a lot of volume because Christian Kirk and Gabriel Davis are both on IR. So even Parker Washington is a reliable target along with Evan Ingram. They all get a collective upgrade given the injuries at receiver. But Mac Jones collectively a downgrade to the offense. In Miami, Raheem Mostert is questionable with a hip injury. He was limited all week in practice and is expected to play, but there is a world where Devon Achane gets more touches. If anything, the benefactor would be Jalen Wright. Achane's role is pretty secure. Jalen Wright might get some big volume in garbage time. I don't think the Jets are going to be that competitive this week, and I could see a lot of snaps for Jalen Wright in the second half if the score is out of hand. And a reason why I think that is because the Jets are going to be without Breece Hall. The running back was ruled out with a knee injury, and at this point he may be out for the year. I have a hard time believing that the Jets have much confidence rest of season. So they might just be punting for next year. Breece Hall's a critical asset. I think Braylon Allen may be the guy rest of season. I think he could have a Zamir White type of role. If you recall, last year Zamir was that playoff backup that really popped off with big volume in Las Vegas. So Braylon Allen, if he is still available, go ahead and pick him up. I think he's a decent flex play. I'd like to see what this role really looks like because backup Isaiah Davis did vulture both of them on the goal line last week. Isaiah Davis might actually be involved. Too soon to know for sure, but overall the Jets offense really loses value with no Breece Hall. I don't see that many points for the Jets, but in the Vikings-Falcons game, both teams are healthy. No problems with their rosters. Every offensive weapon is active, but in the Jets offense, they are without Theo Johnson. He was placed on IR. The tight end will be replaced by Daniel Bellinger, and I don't think you're starting Daniel Bellinger. Most people weren't starting Theo Johnson in the first place, but Malik Nabers is questionable with a groin/hip injury, a combo of the two, and he was limited Thursday, downgraded midweek, and then did not practice on Friday. So really concerning news with Malik Nabers. I really do not feel good about starting him, but obviously if he is active, he gets enough volume to merit flex consideration. So he's a game time decision you have to make sure. I am not expecting him to play, but at the moment it is closer to 50-50. I'd be pretty pessimistic about it though. I would probably rather pivot to someone else. So even if he does play, I'm not that excited. I did downgrade him in the rankings. Drew Lock would get a downgrade. The Giants offense as a whole would get a downgrade. Maybe the Saints defense would get an upgrade, but Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jalen Hyatt, while they do get an upgrade, I don't really trust them to actually step up. So hard to predict where the targets are going to go if Nabers is out. At the moment, I don't think he will suit up. But I did rank him. I'll mention him later in the video. In New Orleans, Taysom Hill was placed on IR, knee injury last week, and Kendre Miller may be one of the guys stepping up in his absence. Kendre Miller is expected to return off of IR. He was practicing this week. So not many snaps for Kendre Miller, but Alvin Kamara needs a backup, and I would rather go Kendre off the wire than Jamal Williams. I don't think I'd rather start either of them. I just see a huge game for Alvin Kamara. But perhaps Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, or MVS do get a few more targets. Taysom Hill was a huge part of their offense. Without him, it's all up for grabs because Olave, Shaheed, and Bub Means all still remain on IR, and I really doubt they come back at this point rest of season. So rough spot for the Saints, but I do think they win over the Giants, who are tanking and probably going to get a top 2 pick next season. In Philly, the Tight end Dallas Goedert is out, and he is going to be placed on IR. So rest of the season, Grant Calcaterra will be the tight end one, getting all the targets at that position. However, I don't know if he's like a reliable option. Maybe he cracks the top 20 a few times, but I doubt you're going to trust him as a top 12 tight end at any point rest of season. But he does get those targets and snaps in place of Goedert. Devontae Smith, though, is active. He's missed the last 2 games with a hamstring injury. He will play this week. In Carolina, JaTavion Sanders, the tight end, is questionable with a neck injury. He did not play last week, and I do expect him to suit up because he was limited Wednesday, Thursday, upgraded to full on Friday. So it is a neck injury. They want to make sure on Sunday, I do expect him to get cleared in time to suit up. And last week, we saw a lot of volume for Tommy Tremble because not only was Sanders out, Ian Thomas was also placed on IR, and JaTavion Sanders is definitely above Tremble on the depth chart. So I could see a large volume for JaTavion. I think those corners will really shut down Thielen, and JaTavion Sanders might be the main benefactor getting targets from Bryce Young. So that's a potential pickup off the wire as a replacement for Taysom Hill, but obviously not a reliable, safe play, just someone to think about. Jalen Coker, the wide receiver, is doubtful. He also missed the last 2 games, and none of the receivers really benefit from his absence. So with Miles Sanders on IR, it's kind of just what we expected. Jonathan Brooks gets a slight upgrade, but not enough to trust just yet. In Pittsburgh, George Pickens was added to the injury report late in the week. He was limited on Friday, the last day of practice, with a hamstring injury. So not great. I'm hoping it's just a minimal thing, but obviously I did downgrade him a bit. I had him in the elite tier. I'm not convinced that is the case anymore. He could be limited, maybe not as fast, and maybe Pat Freiermuth draws a few more targets instead. So Pickens, I think, will play. He's a game time decision, so make sure. But as long as he suits up, I still think you're starting him this week against the Browns. In Cleveland, in the same game, Cedric Tillman, not going to suit up, out for the 2nd week in a row with a concussion, and that's a bit shocking. Usually concussions don't last this long. So that means Elijah Moore will get the big upgrade. We saw a ton of volume for him last week, and in general, David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy are also more reliable. So a more narrow target share from Jameis Winston means all 3 of these players have massive upside. I do want to be starting all of the Browns pass catchers, but maybe Michael Woods tempts you. I doubt it. I did rank him, but he is not safe enough at this point in time. In Las Vegas, the running back Zamir White is out. However, Alexander Mattison, who's missed the last 2 games, just like Zamir, is questionable, limited all week in practice with that ankle injury. So I am expecting Mattison to get back on the field, and if he does, I think he's the clear RB1 in Vegas. That's not a valuable role, but still it's something, and if you have been rolling with Amir Abdullah, you have to pivot away from him. Maybe Mattison is available on the wire, perhaps he was dropped, and he is a game time decision 50-50 in my view, but if he does suit up, he would be the guy to plug in at flex in Las Vegas. So maybe, just maybe, you'll consider him. I don't think Abdullah or Sincere McCormick are interesting enough anymore. Jakobi Meyers is questionable himself with an ankle injury, did not practice Thursday, but then was limited on Friday, and according to the coach, he was a full go. Expect him to suit up. So not quite full according to reports, but on Sunday, expect Jakobi to be on the field. He is a target machine, especially with DJ Turner on IR. I don't trust Trey Tucker to steal any volume. It's just Jakobi Meyers and Brock Bowers. Now Mattison is in the run game. In Tampa Bay, the same matchup, a potential league winner, Bucky Irving, is questionable with a hip injury. He did not practice Thursday or Wednesday, but was limited on Friday. So at least he practiced in some capacity. It's not a guarantee, though. I really have no idea what's going to happen with Bucky Irving because they probably don't need him to beat the Raiders. I think he's a game time decision 50-50. You need to make sure. I'm optimistic he plays, but it's not guaranteed. I do see a lot more volume for Rachaad White. So a big downgrade for Bucky Irving. I don't know if he's top 5 in the rankings anymore. Obviously, a liability if he's not 100%. So an upgrade to Rachaad White, maybe Sean Tucker gains some value if Bucky is indeed ruled out. But then Baker Mayfield probably throws more pass attempts, and Cade Otton and Mike Evans do benefit in that scenario. Bucky Irving probably doesn't see 20-plus rush attempts if he's not 100%. So good news for Baker and the pass catchers. Rachaad White also gets an upgrade. In Arizona, they are fully healthy. All of the Cardinals will be available this week. But in Seattle, DK Metcalf was full in practice this week. He is active, no concern for him in this game. But Kenneth Walker, I don't expect to play. Questionable with both a calf and ankle injury, limited on Wednesday, but then downgraded to a non-participant. Both Thursday and Friday, he was not on the practice field. So I have no expectation for Kenneth Walker this week. I removed him from the rankings, and I do think Zach Charbonnet is a must start. Definitely a top 20 option if Walker's unavailable. Almost all of the volume will be going to Charbonnet. Definitely some goal line rush attempts. I do think Charbonnet is a main benefactor and definitely a good start now that Walker is probably not going to suit up. According to the coaching staff, they're not sure it's a game time call, but it sounds like Walker won't be available. So bad news for him, but in LA, the Rams are still not going to get Tyler Higbee back. He's not going to make his debut yet, and aside from him, everybody else is healthy. But in Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid is questionable with a knee injury, limited all week in practice. Expect him to play. He has missed the last 2 games dating back to before their bye week. So Dawson Knox does get a downgrade. Kincaid is still a game time decision, but I do think he'll suit up. The fact that he was practicing every single day means I think he suits up on Sunday. And same situation with Keon Coleman. He has missed the last 2 games as well, but with his wrist injury, he was limited all week in practice and is a game time decision, just like Kincaid. So I think the Bills receiving core will be fully healthy. I do expect both Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid to be on the field. So Dawson Knox, the main loser in terms of value. I think Amari Cooper also kind of unstartable with Coleman on the field. But in Chicago, Roschon Johnson, the running back, has been ruled out with a concussion. He did not practice at all this week. So that means DeAndre Swift is in line to get all of those goal line carries. However, DeAndre Swift is questionable himself. Swift is dealing with a quad injury, and he did not practice both Wednesday or Thursday, but he was at least limited on Friday. So it was something. It's not a lot, and obviously he's not 100%, but perhaps because of the Roschon Johnson situation, they're just being extra cautious with Swift and just making sure he's fully good to go for Sunday's game against the Niners. Obviously, at this point in the season, no one is 100%, and maybe the running back who's a veteran, knows the system the best, probably doesn't need to practice like crazy to play on Sunday. So I do expect Swift on the field, but you need to make sure the benefactor, though, would be Travis Homer. He would get the start if Swift is ruled inactive. So I expect Swift on the field. He gets an upgrade because of no Roschon Johnson. The touchdown's far more likely to hit, but obviously if he doesn't suit up, then you can't start him. You have to pay attention with DeAndre Swift. There is some risk you get a bagel if you don't. DJ Moore, questionable himself with a quad injury, didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday either, but then just like DeAndre Swift, was upgraded to limited on Friday. And if you look at DJ Moore's game log, he has 3 consecutive years with 17 full games played. And according to him, he plays through injury all of the time. He always suits up. And that's why I am expecting DJ Moore to play. I think just like DeAndre Swift, I think those early practice sessions were not that necessary. They were just making sure he was healthy for the game itself. So I do think DJ Moore will suit up. If he doesn't, then obviously Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen do get an upgrade. But earlier in the week, Keenan Allen didn't practice on Wednesday either with an ankle injury, but then he was full later in the week. Keenan Allen will suit up. So with his practice situation, I think that's kind of the same situation for the other guys, and that's why I do think DJ Moore and Swift will play for the Bears. But in San Francisco, we know this already. Christian McCaffrey was placed on IR. So was Jordan Mason. And the player to start would be Isaac Guerendo. There will be some volume, though, for Kyle Juszczyk, especially in the passing game. Juszczyk will get on the field, but Guerendo is the guy, a potential league winner rest of season if the volume is there. In Kansas City, the kicker Harrison Butker, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown are all on IR. They have been for a few weeks now, but Marquise Brown may start practicing in week 15 or maybe week 16. He will meet with a doctor to reevaluate the situation. He might step back on the field before the NFL playoffs do begin. So Hollywood Brown might be joining the team soon, but not yet, not in week 14. He's still on IR. In LA for the Chargers, J.K. Dobbins is on IR, so Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal get the upgrade. Last week they gave a touch to Hassan Haskins. He fumbled, and then he was never seen from again. So Kimani Vidal would be the backup. I think some targets might be available for him this week, but it's possible that Dobbins does return before the playoffs. He's not expected to be done for the year, at least 4 weeks, which means maybe week 17 or that first playoff week. I do think Dobbins will be back in January, but Ladd McConkey is probably the most critical player to watch in this game. Questionable status. He was limited all week in practice with both a knee and a shoulder injury, and he didn't look the same in the second half against the Falcons last week. But he did go over 100 yards, and I think they're just being cautious with him. I expect him to suit up. He might be more of a decoy, though, if these injuries are serious. So make sure with McConkey, I do think he'll be active. I think he's on the field, but not 100%. Maybe Josh Palmer is actually the guy this week. It could be the third game. Palmer goes over 100 yards against the Chiefs, but it is a good matchup for Will Dissly. I do think Dissly and Palmer could get more targets because of McConkey's questionable status. But in general, that's just a downgrade to Justin Herbert. If McConkey is not available, there's no chance you're starting Herbert, but I do think McConkey keeps Herbert in the top 20 in terms of floor. I think Herbert's fine for about 14, 15 points. Probably not worth starting if you need more than 18. In Dallas, though, the last game of the week, Jake Ferguson, questionable, was full in practice on Thursday. So he has missed the last 2 games with a concussion, and I do expect him to play. Luke Schoonmaker loses his value. So Ferguson would be the start at tight end, an interesting pickup off the wire if somebody did drop him. In Cincinnati, the kicker Evan McPherson was placed on IR, and according to ESPN, I did not see a backup listed, so maybe the Bengals are rolling without a kicker. I doubt it. I'm sure they have someone, but I do not know who it is. You can't pick them up on ESPN, last I checked. And other than that, the Lions and Packers did play on Thursday, along with the Ravens, Broncos, Houston Texans, Colts, Patriots, and Commanders. All those 6 teams are on bye. So that wraps it up for all the player news. But in terms of weather updates, earlier in the week, I did tell you that Tennessee-Jacksonville game was going to be raining, and the storm appears to be pushed back now that we're closer to the actual day. The heavy majority of the rainfall will be after 7 p.m., and based on the actual time of the game, it probably won't be raining until the fourth quarter, if at all. There's only a 10% chance of rain during the Titans game in Tennessee. So no weather updates at all this week. Weather's not a factor except for that 10% chance in Nashville. But there are a few defensive players I want to mention, not too many, but a few game changers, big names that are difference makers on defense. In Minnesota, the cornerback Stephon Gilmore has been ruled out. In Miami, edge rusher Bradley Chubb has been ruled out. In Arizona, they got defensive end Darius Robinson, the rookie, back last week. He made his debut in week 13, and maybe his snap percentage does go up this week. But in New York, the Giants have 11 defensive players either out or on IR. There's also another 2 that are questionable. The Saints offense will definitely capitalize on the Giants' injuries. But in Philadelphia, Reed Blankenship, the cornerback, has been ruled out. And in San Francisco, defensive end Nick Bosa will miss another game. He is doubtful. I do not expect him to suit up. But in the Jets defense, cornerback Sauce Gardner also doubtful. And because a player on the depth chart has to be elevated, I do trust Tyreek Hill a bit more, and especially Jalen Waddle could get the biggest advantage with no Sauce Gardner, because DJ Reed will now mainly be covering Tyreek Hill. The backup, who normally doesn't play as much, will be on Waddle. I could see Waddle play very well this week. So that's interesting, a player to monitor. But in Tampa Bay, their secondary is still depleted with injuries, and the same situation applies in Tennessee. But they are getting slightly healthier. Cornerback Chidobe Awuzie is expected to return off of IR this week. He does no longer have an injury designation. But last player to mention, he's on bye, but Marshawn Lattimore, the Commanders cornerback, who they did trade for recently, is questionable. He started practicing, and it looks like he probably makes his debut in week 15 at the New Orleans Saints, his former team. So they've been saving him for the playoffs for this late season push, and Lattimore could make their defense very, very difficult to go up against. So that's a name to keep in mind, but not a big impact this week. He's on bye. So that's it for all of the updates, but before I get into the rankings, I'm going to move up this segment. I mention it at the end of the video, usually on Saturdays, but I usually mention it early in the week. Let's tell you my updated picks for this week. I'm not changing anything straight up. I'm keeping it all the same, but I am adjusting a few things against the spread. Only the Chargers line I will change. They're now +4, so I open the window for a push. I will bump it up from 3.5 to 4. The Chargers are now bigger underdogs than they were on Monday. But I kind of feel like I like all of the numbers this week. I'm actually going to give you every single pick against the spread. Here they are on the screen. My previous picks, I had the Packers +3.5. That one worked out. The Cardinals -2.5. The Bills -4. The Bears +5.5. The Chargers +4. And the Cowboys +6. But here are the rest of the games this week. I'm taking the Dolphins to cover -6. I think they definitely win by more than a touchdown against the Jets, who have a lot of injuries on their team. The Eagles, I think, will dominate the Panthers, so give me the Eagles -13.5. I think they do win by more than 2 touchdowns. The Browns in division, I think, will keep it close. Usually Mike Tomlin's a much better underdog. However, as a favorite, usually does struggle to cover. So AFC North game going to be a close one. I don't expect the Steelers to win by a full touchdown unless there's a fourth quarter pick 6 that does put them over the top. So slightly risky. That's why I didn't pick it on Monday, but I'm going with every game this week. Give me the Browns +6.5 to cover. In that division, it rarely turns into a blowout. But the Raiders, I think, will keep it relatively close. With Bucky Irving banged up, I do see Brock Bowers keeping it within a touchdown. So the Raiders +6.5, I don't think will lose by more than 7. The Jaguars, I think, could actually pull an upset, and they're underdogs here. I'm going to take the Jags +3, but I don't feel great about it. I would probably ignore betting this game if I could, but for this week, I'll give you the Jags +3. But the Saints -5.5, I do see a big blowout over the Giants, especially if Malik Nabers is out. Definitely give me the Saints by over a touchdown, -5.5. I like that number a lot. But then lastly, I think the Falcons do keep it within a touchdown. I don't know if the Vikings are that much better than Atlanta. I kind of feel like Kirk Cousins may have been looking ahead to this matchup, and that's why he sucked so much last week against the Chargers. Not an easy spot. I think they'll be relatively competitive. It won't be a massive blowout. Give me the Falcons +6. So these are all of my picks this week against the spread here on the screen. Go ahead and use them if you want, but the top 6, these ones specifically, are what I chose on Monday. These are the ones that I care most about, and the other ones are just kind of for fun. But maybe I'll do this again, maybe I won't. To close the season in December, I thought maybe I'd try it out for once. But now let's get to my rankings, my final updates, and let's start with running back, where in general there's some big changes in the top 15. We took out Breece Hall, previously running back 12, as well as Kenneth Walker, previously running back 14. And while Walker is questionable, I really do not expect him to play. He has not practiced Thursday or Friday, and I don't see why he would suit up. So they get taken out, and a lot of players do move up, but the biggest mover in the top 15 would be Bucky Irving, moving down 10 spots overall. Because of his questionable status, only a limited session on Friday, I have some major concerns against the Raiders, especially if it's a big win. If it's a blowout, why push it with Bucky in the second half if they don't need to? So I see more touches for Rachaad White. I still think if Bucky starts, you should be starting him. At running back 13, I do think the floor is still pretty decent. He'll probably score a touchdown and be very efficient. So yeah, I probably ranked him way too high earlier in the week, but only because of this injury. If he wasn't injured at all, I would still see Bucky Irving as a game changer, a top 5 running back. I had him at number 3 back on Tuesday. So he moves down 10 spots, a full tier, and I don't feel great about it. But if he suits up, I think you have to start Bucky Irving. He's just way too good as of late. But if he is ruled out, I would absolutely slot in Rachaad White right here at number 13. I think Rachaad White would be a very safe top 15 option, and I'd put him right here where Bucky Irving is at number 13. But we'll get to Rachaad in just a sec. Let's talk about the other players ranked above him. With him moving down 10 spots, everybody else would move up 1. But with Breece Hall getting taken out, James Conner moves up 2 spots, so not really a big change in my projection for Conner. It's just less players to compete with. And DeAndre Swift, I did bump up 7 spots overall. Swift is not 100% guaranteed to play. He is questionable. You need to make sure he's active, but it's a really good matchup against the Niners. It's ranks top 4 against running backs, and Roschon Johnson was the only hesitation for starting Swift, in my opinion. With no Roschon, there's no vulture options on the goal line. If they're going to hand it off, it's going to go to Swift for sure. So Swift likely gets a touchdown. I think he moves up a full tier. I rank him 7 spots higher. He used to be at number 19, now at number 12. I really trust DeAndre Swift this week with no Roschon Johnson. So he's at number 12, 1 spot above Bucky Irving. And then at number 14, where I previously ranked Kenneth Walker, is now where I have Zach Charbonnet. I love the volume intended for Charbonnet. I'm a bit concerned it's a low-scoring game against the Cardinals, but still, I really like his volume this week. I love the pass catching role I envision for him, and as well as on the goal line, I expect all of those touches to be available. So just like DeAndre Swift and Bucky Irving, I would expect a touchdown here, and that's what keeps him pretty viable. Charbonnet is not really the most efficient player, but he's good enough to be a legit starter, and I would rank him as a top 14 option, expecting Walker not to play. But if somehow Walker does suit up, then Walker slides back right here at number 14. I would expect Walker to get that touchdown instead. So Charbonnet would then move back down to where I ranked him originally. Back at running back 47, I doubt you're starting Charbonnet if Walker is actually on the field. But those are the only changes in the top 15 up to this point. Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Rico Dowdle do remain in the same spots in this tier. I would be starting those 3 players this week. But Rachaad White moves up 2 spots, still in the same tier because Bucky Irving, assuming he is on the field, I don't know if Rachaad will be like by far and away the overwhelming guy in terms of volume. So I do expect a safer floor for him, more targets probably from Baker Mayfield and more snaps on the field, but Rachaad maybe isn't the most explosive option. If he does get the start and Bucky Irving sits, then he would move up to RB13, but at RB18, I would be starting him regardless. He does jump Tony Pollard in these rankings. But then because Braylon Allen gets slotted in here behind Isaac Guerendo, that's why he does move up 1 spot. It's basically like he jumps Breece Hall and Braylon Allen then doesn't jump him. So Isaac Guerendo moves up to RB20, but I still view him the same projection. Braylon Allen, I view in the same vein. Like, we don't know exactly what we're going to get for Guerendo or Braylon Allen, but obviously the volume could be massive, and maybe they score all of the touchdowns this week. You could get 25 touches. Even if the team loses by a lot, those running backs will still probably get a lot of volume. So I would still think Braylon Allen is a safe flex play. Just like Guerendo, I want to wait 1 week before I fully endorse it, but given 6 teams are on bye, they do rank as viable flex options. I do think Guerendo and Braylon Allen are pretty safe, probably projected for over 10 points. But then Jalen Warren stays put, so does Isaiah Pacheco, Nick Chubb, Tyrone Tracy, Chuba Hubbard. But then at 27, I would still be benching Alexander Mattison, but I do have him atop this tier. He does jump Tyjae Spears, where previously I had Abdullah below Tyjae Spears, and I do think Mattison is a safer bet, more likely to find the end zone. But volume is still not that valuable in the Raiders backfield. So not a player I want to start just behind Chuba Hubbard, who gets a terrible matchup. There is a tier break, and I'd rather bench him, but I still would rather go Tyjae Spears in the best matchup on the board versus Jacksonville than trust Travis Etienne in the same game. And do what you want, but I really have no faith in any Jacksonville running back at the moment. So while he does move up 1 spot, it's because Roschon Johnson gets taken out, and everybody else behind them should be moving up 1 spot as well. But I think Gus Edwards is a bit more likely to score a touchdown than Ray Davis and Kyle Juszczyk, so I did bump him up 4 spots. He's now RB31, but then a few other changes down below in the rankings. Probably not players you're starting, but Bigsby moves up as Raheem Mostert moves down. I also downgraded Amir Abdullah several spots as well. And then Jalen Wright is right behind Raheem Mostert. There's a chance that Mostert doesn't play, but against the Jets, I could see a lot of garbage time, and maybe the rookie Jalen Wright does get a lot of snaps in the second half because of that. So Jalen Wright, an interesting pivot, maybe in the same vein as a guy like Will Shipley or Kenny Gainwell. There is some upside for Jalen Wright. But then outside at that point, I don't think you're starting anyone, but I do rank Travis Homer, Isaiah Davis, and Sean Tucker now inside the top 50 at 44, 45, 46. They're relevant, but probably not worth starting. I downgraded Jamal Williams because of Kendry Miller's activation off of IR. So those are the updates at running back. Now let's talk about the receiver position, where in general, there are a few minute changes. I feel a lot more safe about Mike Evans now that Bucky Irving is questionable. I upgraded Mike Evans up a tier 2 spots overall. I still think I'd rather go A.J. Brown than Mike Evans, but Evans should probably find the end zone and probably goes over 100 yards like he did last week. So Evans is a very safe play. I would absolutely start Mike Evans, a top 7 wide receiver this week. But with no Cedric Tillman, I see even more volume for Jerry Jeudy. It will resemble a bit more like last week, maybe not over 200 yards, but the chances at over 100 from Jameis Winston in garbage time are always there. So just so much volume, so much upside in that Browns passing game. I think Jeudy is a must start. With no Tillman, there's more of a guarantee he finds the end zone. So he moves up a tier, and I think George Pickens moves down a tier because of the limited practice session on Friday. I don't know if Pickens is as safe as before, but only moving down 3 spots. He is now only getting jumped by A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, and Jerry Jeudy in the rankings. Not that much different, but just not as guaranteed to pop off. So only 3 spots lower. Pickens is still a good play this week. I think he plays, and I'm not worried about him missing time. But as he moves down, some other players move down as they get jumped by Evans and Jeudy. And I do still think everyone is kind of in the same vein. They're not moving down because I'm less interested in them. It's just I'm more interested in Evans and Jeudy. So kind of the same rankings overall, but I do think Brian Thomas needs to move up a tier. I really trust Brian Thomas a lot. And with no rain expected in Tennessee, why not start him with confidence? So he's now in this tier. I definitely think he's a safer option than Jakobi Meyers or Lad McConkey, who are both questionable this week. Brian Thomas should play very, very well. And with no Sauce Gardner, I also expect Tyreek Hill to play even better. So I love Tua this week. I think Tyreek Hill's a very safe play. I bumped him up 4 spots now also in this must-start wide receiver 2 tier. At number 19, I do expect over 14 points from Tyreek Hill. I trust him a lot. I would 100% start Tyreek Hill. But given the questionable designation for both Myers and McConkey, they're now below the tier break. I think they're below that blue line. The projection moves down just a little bit because the injury designation is a slight red flag. I expect both of them to play, especially Myers. I think Myers will be fine, but still, it's just a slight concern. So that's why I'd rather go Brian Thomas or Tyreek Hill over Myers or McConkey. But in general, it's all the same. As Tyreek moves up, these other guys move down. And then as we get into the flex conversation, I did upgrade Jalen Waddle 6 spots overall. I think Waddle is a very safe option. With no Sauce Gardner, he's going to line up against a backup corner a lot. The Jets do have good corners. There is good depth, and maybe DJ Reader still matches up against him. But just like Tyreek Hill, I do trust Waddle a lot more. I love Tua's upside this week, and I think Waddle will be good play. As long as Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane don't vulture all of the production, I would expect good volume and efficiency from Waddle this week. So go ahead and start him. Just like Christian Watson, I think now he's a good play given some injuries in this game elsewhere. But below the tier break, I have Devontae Smith moving down 1 spot, along with Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers is not a guarantee to play. So even if he does, he moves down 5 spots overall. Questionable this week, and I really worry about it. He could easily miss this game. He has not been practicing the last couple days. So Nabers, a big liability. You might just want to bench him. I have a hard time trusting him this week. So just wide receiver 31, not safe anymore. Right above Marvin Harrison Jr., though, I do prefer his matchup rather than Harrison against Devon Witherspoon. But as other players move down, it's because Jalen Waddle moves up. And I do trust Elijah Moore a lot more. This is essentially where I had Tillman. I had Tillman right below Westbrook-Ikine, but with Tillman out with a concussion, I do trust Elijah Moore a lot. I see a lot of catch-up mode, a lot of pass attempts for the Browns this week. Elijah Moore is way safer, should go over at least 8 or 9 targets against the Steelers. So he moves up 10 spots. I think he's a much more viable flex play, a lot more interesting, is Elijah Moore. But then Tyler Lockett, I am actually going to do it. I'm going to rank him above DK Metcalf. Go ahead and disagree with me if you want. I know I've been shitting on Metcalf a lot, but I looked at the matchup stats. Lockett just owns this matchup in Arizona, always finds the end zone, and Metcalf sucks. He gives you 6 points per game. I'd rather go Lockett than Metcalf straight up. I do that research for a reason, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to bump up Lockett 3 spots. He's still a bit risky, but downgrade Metcalf 9 spots and tell you if you're starting one of the two, give me Tyler Lockett. essentially I'm telling you to bench both. I don't know how safe they are. With JSN in the equation, it's definitely a bit more random, but I have no confidence in Metcalf this week. I'd rather go Lockett because I do think he's more viable to find the end zone, especially with Kenneth Walker off the field. One of those touchdowns has to go to someone else. So I think it goes to Lockett. I trust him more than DK Metcalf. So Metcalf moves down 9 spots. I also downgraded MVS 3 spots. There's just not much volume for him. He's so touchdown dependent, a bit less safe than Westbrook Akine. And then Xavier Worthy and Deebo Samuel get jumped by Lockett and Elijah Moore, so they move down 2 spots. And then in this next tier, I'm going to do it. I'm going to upgrade Josh Palmer to the top of the tier. Moves up 5 spots. I could see a big game in terms of targets for him. They're going to need him if Ladd McConkey is indeed very injured. So he jumps Parker Washington, but I did downgrade Adam Thielen as well. I'd rather go Josh Palmer, Parker Washington, or Roma Dunze than Adam Thielen this week. I hate the matchup for Thielen. And then Calvin Austin cleared the concussion protocol, so he moves up 3 spots, followed by Trey Tucker, Darius Slayton in the top 50. I think that's it. I don't think anybody outside the top 50 is relevant to mention. So let's move on. At quarterback, I didn't make a single change, so I'll show you that in just a second. But at tight end, I did upgrade Cade Otton and Pat Freiermuth. I love the matchup for Freiermuth. With Pickens banged up, I think Freiermuth is more likely to find the end zone than Evan Ingram. So he jumps Ingram. I also think Otton is a bit more interesting with Bucky Irving banged up, so he also jumps Ingram. I still like Evan Ingram, but I prefer Otton and Freiermuth. They were in the same tier, and I think those other two are a bit better. So Ingram moves down 2 spots, but Otton and Freiermuth move up 1 spot a piece. I also feel a bit safer with Njoku, but I did tell you to start Kraft and Laporta above him earlier in the week, so I'll keep it that way. And then Disley I also think is kind of interesting, but last week was terrible. He had a bagel. I would still rank him below Noah Gray. So some minor changes, but not too many. At tight end, it's mostly the same. But then lastly at defense, I think I was underranking the Browns defense a little bit too much, especially with George Pickens banged up. It opened my eyes to the Browns being a decent option in division. Usually a close game, might be low scoring in that AFC North division. So they move up 8 spots. I think I had them 2 tiers too low. And similar to the Bears, they are very talented. I think they're a safer play than the Bucks, who just have so many injuries, not good on defense at all. Same with the Jags and Niners. I don't see any turnovers for the Niners. Jaguars defense pretty much sucks as well. So Browns at number 12, I do think would be one of the starting options this week in a 12-team league with 6 teams on bye. I do think the Browns are the last option I would like to start if I had to. So that's going to be it for all of the updates and my rankings. Here are the quarterback, tight end, and defenses, the top 20 for me this week. If you need to, go ahead and pause it. I'll leave it up for another 5 or so seconds. And now I will show you the flex rankings, where I did feel more confident in a few players like Braylon Allen, Zach Charbonnet, Rashad White obviously move up. Same with DeAndre Swift, but Bucky Irving is really the only player that loses a lot of value. But obviously Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker did get taken out. At receiver, I feel a bit better with Mike Evans and Jerry Jeudy with some injuries in their offenses, but then Brian Thomas, Tyreek Hill, I do think are a bit safer than Jakobi Meyers and Ladd McConkey this week. Waddle's also a lot more interesting, same with Elijah Moore, and I'm just going to go with my gut on guys like Lockett and Josh Palmer, who is technically outside the top 40. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will see you in the playoffs. I'll see you in week 15.